So, unsurprisingly, essay writing is an area of interest to students because it's probably one of the, well, it is one of the main ways that you're going to be assessed on your work. So it's very important. And essay writing is something that you can find out more about, find out about the conventions, how to do it, get better, improve your writing, improve your research. And one of the main ways you can do that is to look at your essay feedback from your lecturer. So sometimes people just worry about the mark, but it's important to look at the feedback. The feedback you get should help you to improve your writing next time, because it should refer to the strengths, but also the areas that could be improved. And if you pay attention to that, hopefully that will help to develop your essay writing for the future. So what we're going to do in this session is we're going to look at breaking down the question and planning your time and developing a plan, an essay plan, proofreading your work. We're going to look at some features of academic writing. And also, last minute, Professor Klaus Nielsen has provided an example of an essay that got 73 marks, which sounds pretty good to me. So we're just going to have a quick look through it. And he said to me that I can put it onto the Moodle area. So I'll do that afterwards, so you can have a look at it in more depth then. So, here's my present to you. It's an early Christmas present. It's how to break down the big task of writing an essay into smaller subtasks. Because sometimes people find when they start the course that there are so many things to do, so many things to read, so many lectures to go to, they can just about keep up with that. And then somebody says, oh, you've got to write this essay as well as that. And they think, oh, I can't manage all that, it's too much. Writing an essay is too big. I'll put that off. Well, this action plan or planning sheet helps you to break down the big task of writing an essay into smaller subtasks. So, for example, you couldn't actually put all of that for Saturday morning to do on your to-do list, Saturday mornings between 10 and 12. That wouldn't happen, would it? It's too big. But you could, Saturday morning, think, well, actually, I could do task one. I could analyse the essay question and break it down and consider the key points. I could do that. And I might even, in addition, be able to develop a plan as well. So you can timetable that and you can achieve it. So psychologically, it's good. You've made a start early on. So it's important when you get these assignments is to plan them, have a timeline, and start it early. Don't leave it. Because you might think, well, I'll have more time next month. And maybe you don't have more time next month. And so maybe you keep putting it off and off. So this helps as a timeline. So if you have the submission date of the essay here, you put in the date that it's due. But maybe, why not bring forward that date by a week, for example? Because if you have any problems leading up to that submission day, and you're planning to hand it in, submit it on the same day as it's due in, you might end up submitting it late. Maybe you're ill, maybe you have flu for a week, maybe you're busy working, maybe you're busy doing lots of other things. So bring forward, I would recommend that you bring forward the submission date by a week. And if there are any problems on the way, you've got an extra week to play with. If there aren't any problems and you can hand it in a week early, well, that's good. You've gained some time. And if you work backwards with a diary or a calendar, putting dates beside each of these tasks, until you get to task one, you've got a timeline to work to. You can see if you're keeping up with your plan, or are you falling behind? So you've identified the question, the main points. From that you could develop a plan. Introduction, what's going to be in that? The main body, what's going to be in that? The conclusion. What's your overall conclusion? What are you going to have in there? Hello. We'll have to get that door oiled. It's a bit squeaky, isn't it? It's okay. So you've got your essay plan. That's like the skeleton, really. Now you need to put something on the skeleton. And you can do that at task 3. Start doing your research and note-taking. And one of the problems that happens is sometimes students go onto Google and then they put in search terms and then they get 10,000 hits and they could spend a good afternoon going through the hits. And a lot of those hits are going to be rubbish. They're not academic sources. So maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe it's better to use what you've already got. Your lecturers have spent many, many hours planning your module. And so they've given you an essential reading list. And some of those texts on the essential reading list must be on the same subject as your essay title. So it's a good idea to go through that essential reading and make notes for anything that you think is valuable to help you write your essay. Also, you'll have lecture slides. So identify which lecture was it where we covered this particular topic. Let me go through those slides again. Let me look at the handouts and let me go through my lecture notes. Hello. So this is very helpful because you know all of these resources are on the subject of your essay. And also, they are from academic sources. They're from your lecturer. So you can have confidence in them. And then you can think about your plan, part 2. Look at your notes. And then number 4, write your first draft. And some people think, oh, that's a bit too early to start writing my first draft. But it's good to write your first draft early. Why do you think it's good to write it so early?
So you can have time to edit it and tweak it.
Tweak it, yeah. Because it's not going to be great first time, is it? It's going to be okay, but it could be improved. So thanks for that. And in fact, this is the first time that you have seen in one document your answer. Because up to now, you've had your thoughts about this answer on your notes pages, in your head, but all these ideas and notes haven't been put together to answer that particular question. This is the first time, number 4, where you've got a document that answers the question. So it's important, because then you've got something to work with. You can read through the first draft, and you'll find some things that are good about it, but you'll also find some things that could be better. And there might be some gaps, which is great, because if you can find the gaps and the weaknesses, that helps you to focus on what do you need to improve the essay. You can be very focused in your research. So then you can move on to number 5. Now you can start doing your wider reading and note-taking. Very, very focused, because you know what you need to develop your essay. So the wider reading, sometimes modules have an additional reading list. Not all of them, some of them do. So if yours does, have a look at that additional reading list and identify any of the texts that relate to this particular subject. And maybe you can take important information from those texts. Hello. It's okay. Also, in your readings, those writers would have referred to experts, other academics, and their opinions, and their research, and their evidence. Now, you might read something that you think, well, actually, that's quite interesting. I hadn't thought about that. And there's a reference here. There's a citation in the text. It might be Smith, 2010. I think, actually, I'm quite interested in what Smith has got to say. In fact, what I'd like to do is I'd like to find that original text. So if I look at the bibliography at the end, I can find Smith, 2010. Was it a book? Was it a journal? Was it a website? And I can track it down. And then I could read the whole thing for myself. And then I could interpret what that says and think, well, is this useful for my essay? Because otherwise, if you just rely on the essential texts, then you are relying on those authors' interpretation of the text that they've read when they were doing their research. So you're relying on their interpretation. You're relying on secondary research. And I've read sometimes feedback from lecturers and said, no, you're relying on secondary evidence too much. You should go and read for yourself those texts and make your own interpretation rather than relying on another author and their interpretation. So if you find any references in the text that you think, yeah, I really like this is going to be very useful, then look at the end of the bibliography, find the original text, read it, and then you can make your own mind up. And hopefully that's going to be useful. And also, a third way of finding other texts, other research, is there are so many writers and experts in the field that your lecturer, who's running your module, can't write them all down, can't put them all on the module outline. There are too many. But they might mention them verbally in a lecture or seminar. So it'd be worth making a note about that research, that document, that writer, and finding out for yourself. And equally, Birkbeck is an unusual university because many of your fellow students could be experts. They might be working in the particular field that you're writing about. If you're writing about management or marketing or IT or whatever it might be, maybe they're working in the field. They know a lot about the theories. They know about how these theories are implemented in their organisation and other organisations. So it's worth listening to your fellow students. If they mention a particular writer, a particular research or text, it's worth noting that down and finding out for yourself. And then hopefully from all these resources, you can find material to address the gaps and the weaknesses. And then you're in a position to go to number 6. You can write your second draft. And it should be better this time, I hope. It must be, mustn't it? Surely. But it's still not perfect. In fact, it probably never will be perfect. Anything can always be better. But your second draft, if you read it, you'll still notice maybe some gaps and weaknesses. And so if you identify those, then it helps you to do number 7, your research and note-taking part 3. Now, your lecturers will expect you to find your own research articles, your own texts. Where are you going to find those?
There's a lot of sources.
There's a lot of sources. Hello.
Google Scholars.
Google Scholar's one, yeah. You could use Google Scholar. Google Scholar's useful, but it does give hits that aren't necessarily academic sources. I know, for example, I've seen Google Scholar give student essays. So student essays can be on the World Wide Web. And so
if it says that it's a journal of something, then would you be able to say that it's an academic source?
Probably, yes. The only thing is that the journal, I suspect, will probably be held in Birkbeck Library. So what you're doing is you're going a long way round to come back to Birkbeck Library.
Yeah.
So why not cut out the middleman, go straight to Birkbeck Library? Because there you're going to find academic sources. Not all of them are, because things like The Economist, newspapers, they're not academic sources, but you can use them to build your argument.
So actually I was going to ask a question related to that. If you look at, for example, McKinsey articles or Harvard Business Review articles, those can be considered as credible sources, right?
They should be, yeah. If you're not sure, you can always ask your lecturers, and you've got a librarian, a subject librarian, Aidan. So if you want to check about that particular journal, you can ask him. But obviously your lecturer will be an expert as well. So hopefully from those sources, from the library databases, you should find enough material to be able to write up your final draft. And you write your final draft, and maybe even then you find there's some gaps. So maybe you might need to do another round of research and write your final draft. But eventually you'll get there. And then you're up to point 9. Because up to now, your essay is just being read by you. So you can make a few mistakes, spelling mistakes and things like that. Don't have to worry about it. But now you need to think about your audience. So now you need to read through it to check it. Make sure it's academic style writing. There's no obvious errors and so on. And number 10, prepare the final draft. Are you being asked to present it in Arial, size 12, double line spacing? What are the instructions? Make sure you follow the instructions. And make sure that you've checked the citations in the text and the reference list. Is it correct? Then you can proofread it and edit it, and I recommend Clara Reed. I'll talk a little bit about Clara Reed later on. Software. And then you better check your introduction, because you've made several changes, haven't you? You've changed it quite a lot. So you better check your introduction. Does it really tell the reader what's in this essay? Better check it. And then you can hand it in on time, which is great. Because if you hand it in late, there could be a penalty. And that's the last thing you need. So I think this might be useful to help you to plan your tasks to write an essay, your research and your reading and your writing, but also to plan your time. So, essay questions. You've got to break down the title, you've got to understand it. And if you really haven't got a clue when you're given the title, it's really important to ask that lecturer. Excuse me, could you explain that? Maybe try and deconstruct the title. Put it into your own words. If you can put it into your own words correctly, then you understand it. Maybe you could put it into your own words and talk to the lecturer. I think this title is asking me to do this, this and this. Am I right? That way you can take some ownership of it. So here I've got a fairly simple essay title. And essay titles are normally in 3 parts, but they could be 4 parts or 5 parts. Depends how complicated it is. I've seen some essay titles that are 10 lines long, 10, very long, 2 or 3 sentences. So it depends. There'll normally be a directive word, an instruction, like describe, explore, discuss, critically analyse. So it's important to find out what those words mean. How deep are they asking you to explore this particular topic? And then there'll be a subject area. So what's this essay about? It's about homelessness in the UK. Okay, yeah, that's right. I've identified the topic, the subject I'm going to write about. Now, sometimes students leave it at that. They think, okay, I'm just going to find out about homelessness in the UK, and I'm going to go onto these websites and find lots of interesting documents. But it's not actually an academic discussion or debate. That arrives when we apply the limiting word to the focus. You're not writing and researching everything you can about homelessness in the UK. You're looking at a particular aspect, and the aspect is, how could it be prevented? There's a debate there. There'll be different opinions. So you need to think about your opinion. What do I think and why? What's my view on this particular subject? So I've identified the question, and I'm going to make sure that I cover every single part of it. I don't want to leave anything out. By the way, I've got some links at the bottom here. I won't go into them, but this one, using English for academic purposes, is very useful. And that explains a lot of these directive or instruction words, if you want definitions of them. Well, I quite like mind maps. Does anyone use mind maps to think through an idea? Or is it just me? Well, you don't have to. I'm not trying to tell you. I'm not trying to sell you something here. I'm a late convert to mind maps. I quite like them because someone explained to me that they work like the brain works. They see connections between things. Whereas if you tried to brainstorm this particular topic in an exercise book, lined exercise book, you'd be writing the key points on different lines. And then there's no connection between what's on the first line and what's on the 10th line. Whereas here you can see connections. It's a more creative way of thinking. So in the centre I would put the central essay idea. Oh, it's about homelessness in the UK, isn't it? And then I can think of key topics, key points. I can see links. I can think about key writers, key texts. I can think about key theories. And when I'm thinking about this, I would think, well, actually, homelessness in the UK, now I think that could be quite controversial because I think there are different definitions of homelessness. I think the government might have a particular definition of homelessness. They might have a count. They might have people going out on the streets and counting, maybe at the end of every month or every 6 months, how many people are out lying on the street. And we're going to add them all up and we're going to say that's the official figure of, it's the people living out on the street. But then a charity like Crisis or Shelter might say, well, no, that's not it at all. It's all those people plus all the other people who haven't got a home to go to. Hello. They haven't got a home to go to. They're not visible on the street, but maybe I've heard about people going on the night bus and going round and round London the whole night, having a little sleep. So they're not out on the street, but they're there, they haven't got a home. People sleeping in train carriages. People sleeping in their friends' flats or houses on the floor. And lots of other, hostels and things. So maybe there's another definition of homelessness. So it's quite a controversial subject. So maybe I need to think about that. Which version, which definition of homelessness am I going to work with? So I need to think about that. So one of my first points would be, I need to arrive at a definition. And then thinking about how homelessness could be prevented, I might need to think, well, what causes it in the first place? Why is it happening? And then I might want to think about, well, why is this question being asked now? Has something happened? Are there more homeless people now? I speak to a lot of people and they think, yes, I see more people around, begging. So maybe it's government policy. What is happening? Why are there more homeless people, or are there more? Is it because of the financial crisis from 2008 onwards? I'm not giving you answers here, I'm just sort of making suggestions. So it's up to you to decide. And then when I've thought about the reasons for it and why this question is being asked now, then I can start thinking about, well, how can we solve this problem? What can we do? Is there any solution to it? I can start coming up with those thoughts. But I also need to be thinking about, well, what are the experts saying? What are the theories on this particular topic? So I'm going to make my case, but I'm going to bring in expert witnesses to give their views in my essay. So it's a discussion in my essay that I'm having, and I'm bringing forward these expert witnesses to make the case. So there's a couple of links here to mind mapping. There's one that's a little video, Tony Buzan, who claims to have created mind maps. I don't know if that's true, but it's quite entertaining. So one of the things your lecturers want from your essays is they don't want to just read what you've found in research, although that's valuable, because they want to find out what do you think and why. If you don't give your view, then you can't get a good mark, because you are supposed to have a view on this topic. It's important that you do. And you give your view in the conclusion. So as you get the essay title, as you do the reading, as you attend the lectures, as you talk to fellow students, you should be thinking about the title and thinking about the information, the knowledge that you're gaining, and is this helping you to build an argument? Can you support your initial view on this particular topic with the research, with the information you have? So you need to think, what's my point of view in relation to the question? Why do I think this? And what evidence have I got to support my view? I can't just have a view, I need to have a view supported by evidence. And then I need to think about what other points of view are there, because, as I've said, there'll be a variety of views. And I need to think, well, what are the reasons for the other views? And what evidence is there to support these other views? And what are the strengths and weaknesses of these different perspectives? Are there weaknesses and strengths in particular pieces of evidence? Or maybe there's no link between the conclusions that people are arriving at and the evidence supporting them. Maybe it's very weak. And why is my point of view more persuasive than other points of view? Why should somebody accept what I'm saying? And how can I structure the results of my thinking so that I can present a logical and fluent argument so that it's easy to follow? Someone could read my essay and understand it, see my reasoning. They might not even agree with me, but they can respect my argument. And you need to put that into a structure. Now, there'll always be an introduction. Even in an exam, you should have an introduction. In the exam, it might only be a sentence or 2 sentences. The focus of the essay, what is it? How have I interpreted the question? Why is this question being asked now? Why is it of relevance? Why is it important? What are the key points that I need to address in order to answer the question? And I could give my thesis statement. That means I could explain what I think. But I don't use the word I. I might write something like, this essay will argue that homelessness has been caused by government policies. Maybe. Or I could be more neutral. I don't have to give a thesis statement. I don't have to tell the reader what I think. I could be more neutral and write, this essay will consider the reasons for the increase in homelessness in the UK, and then go on to consider possible solutions to this. Hello. So I'm setting out a plan in the introduction. I'm telling the reader, this is what I'm going to be looking at. This is how I'm going to answer the question. And I'm going to answer it in this order. First, I'm going to look at this, maybe a definition of homelessness. Secondly, I'm going to look at the causes of it. And thirdly, I'm going to look at ways that it could be prevented. So there's 3 things I'm going to do. And I've told the reader that. So they've got confidence in me, because I know how to structure my argument. And then I move from the introduction to the body, and I raise each of those points, one by one, in the same order that I mentioned them in the introduction. Not forgetting any relevant theory. There's always going to be some sort of theory or practice or model that's appropriate to this particular argument. So what is it? So I'm going to make my arguments for and against. Show on the one hand there's this view about this, and on the other hand there's a counter view. Show the evidence for and against. And then eventually, when I've looked at all the arguments and I've raised all the points, I'm going to get to the conclusion. I draw together the key points. I go back to the question. I explain how I've answered the question. And I give the significance. What are the major issues that have arisen? And do I have any recommendations? What's the significance of what I've written? Oh, and I better make sure I put a bibliography in at the end as well. So I've said before, there's at least 3 parts. The directive words like analyse, evaluate, explain. The topic, that's the giant canvas. This is what it's all about. This is the subject. The limiting words are the focus. It's not about the whole subject. It's about a particular element, a particular aspect. If I write about the whole subject, I'm going to write descriptively and I'm going to get low marks. So it's important for me to understand what the focus is so that I am concentrating on the key aspect of that particular issue. Oh, so here's one. Here's a question. Financial rewards are the best form of motivation in the workplace. Discuss. So, would anyone like me to tell me what the instruction word is, please? What's it telling me to do? It's discuss, isn't it? And discuss is more complicated than describe. If I write describe, I'm just describing what I see, what I read. Discuss is more complicated because I've actually got to analyse what I read, what I see. I've got to compare and contrast ideas. So it's more demanding. And you're going to get more of those questions if you're a postgraduate student. You're going to get more complicated. You're going to get critically evaluate, analyse, discuss. What's the subject there? What's it about?
Motivation.
Yeah, motivation. And it's looking at motivation in the workplace even, isn't it? So it's a motivation, but in this particular environment. And limiting it, it's saying financial rewards. That's the best way of motivating people. Now there's an argument for you. Some people say, yes, that's right, pay them more money. Other people say, no, there's more to life than money. People like to feel valued and enjoy their job and so on. Oh, I'm already answering the question. I mean, if you want to be picky about this, you could say motivation is the topic and in the workplace is a limiting word or phrase. I don't care, I'm not going to argue about it. If you think that, that's fine. I'll go along with that. You know, I'm not going to have a wrestle of it with you about it. But it's a good idea to just try and analyse it and think, you know, what's my analysis of this particular question? So I've got to go into detail. I've got to look at the pros and cons. I've got to look at motivation in the workplace. And I've got to think about financial rewards. Are they the best way? So I had a little think about this. And that's the best I could do in terms of PowerPoint. I'm not very good. I'm not an IT wizard. But I'd had to think, and then I thought, discuss. Now what's that? Discuss, that's when you have a written debate, where you argue the pros and cons, the fors and againsts of this proposition, this question. And it's backed up, supported by carefully selected evidence. Hello. We're comparing and contrasting theories and models, ideas, perspectives on this. And it's important that you have a conclusion. What do you think? If you don't give your view on that particular question, then the reader's going to think, oh, they've ducked out of this one. They're not sure. And if you're really not sure, that's fine. That is a position. You could say the evidence is 50-50. It's too finely balanced. Maybe some more research is required. You could put that in your conclusion. That's fine. But you have arrived at a conclusion. So motivation in the workplace. Well, before we mentioned about definitions, well, what is motivation? Better define that. I'm sure there's lots of different definitions of it. And what's the difference between motivation and motivation in the workplace? Is that something specific? Are they two different things? They're obviously related. So what theories or practices are considered in the lectures or the readings in relation to this? Because this isn't coming from nowhere. You would have been to lectures, you'd have had readings to do. So you will be fairly well informed. I'm not saying an expert. Maybe you've only been doing this for 2 weeks. So I'm not saying you know everything there is, but you've got an idea. You need to think about, well, why is motivation important here in the workplace? And who's it important for? Is it important for the employers, so they make lots of money out of the employees? Is it important for the employees? What do they get out of it? Financial rewards. Well, what sort of financial rewards? What are they? Could be bonus. Some sort of financial incentive. The top employee of the week gets a car. Who knows? Pay rise. Oh, that wouldn't be bad, would it? Yeah. And it's saying financial rewards are the best form of motivation. Well, you might need to look at what other forms of motivation are there. How else can companies and managers motivate the staff? And how and why are these different forms of motivation used? And best, anyway, the best form, what does that mean? Best form. Best form for who? Under what circumstances? And what research is there on this? What do we know? Can I point to any evidence, any research that can argue this case, that's going to help me to argue my position? So somebody told me this is a spidergram. I always think it's a bit like mind mapping, but it's a very simple mind mapping because I can't do very complicated mind mapping on PowerPoint. So somebody said that's a spidergram. So maybe it is. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to think of all the ideas that relate to this particular question. And probably I haven't got everything there. I'm sure there's things that have been missed. Now, it may well be that once I've done that and I've exhausted everything I can think of, it might be I look at some of these and I think, well, actually, this point isn't so important. I'll take that one out. I'm really looking at the key points. What are the key issues that I need to write about here? Because maybe I've only got 1,500 words or 2,000 words. I can't go into every single thing there is about motivation in the workplace. Otherwise, I'll have to write a book. I haven't got that. So I've got to be very concise. So I need to think about my plan. What would I write about? Oh, well, I'm going to define motivation, that's for sure. I'll explain it and give some examples if I can. I need to look at why is it important in the workplace? And is it important for the workers? Or are we just talking about the bosses here, the companies? And what theories are there on motivation? And what theories are there on motivation in the workplace? I need to think about what other forms of motivation are there apart from financial rewards. Is there research on this? Does it show that other types of rewards work to encourage employees? I need to think how I'm going to approach this essay. What's my opinion? Have I got a view yet? And if I have got a view, am I going to give that view in the introduction? Am I going to have a thesis statement? This essay will argue that it is important to motivate employees not only with financial rewards but in many other ways as well. Might be training, professional development, autonomy. There might be I'm sure there are a whole range of ways that people can be rewarded. Or should I explain that there are several viewpoints? So I'd say something like, this essay will consider whether financial rewards are the best way of motivating a workforce. And so I need to be thinking my own view, and I need to be thinking or looking for the evidence to support that. So I'm telling the reader, look, this is how I'm setting out my essay. These are the main points I'm going to consider in this order. Now, I'm not saying this is brilliant. This is an example. You make your own mind up. But if you haven't got a decent structure when you start, when somebody reads it, your introduction, and go through the essay, they're going to see that there is no real structure. It's just meandering, rambling. Hasn't been planned in advance. So the main body, this is where you discuss each theory or argument or key point separately. What are the theories and how do they relate to this topic? I need to think about examples and explanations. I know one essay title I saw this week, it was asking for case studies. So examples and illustrations could be given to argue the case. I need to show the different views on this. What do the different experts say or think? What schools of thought are there on this particular subject? What evidence have they got to support their views? And what do I think? I'm going to compare and contrast, showing the strengths and weaknesses of the different approaches to motivating workers. I need to look at these theories and see, well, actually, has the research looked at these theories in the real world? Have they been tested in real world organisations to see if they work, or they don't work, or they only work in certain situations and not others? And it's important to remember, you are conducting a written debate. And I very often say, when you're writing this essay, it's a bit like you're the judge in a court case, and you're bringing in all the witnesses, and they're bringing their evidence with them. And you're asking them questions. What do you think? Why do you think this? Have you got any evidence to support it? Then I might think, oh, you're on the opposite side. You think something different. What do you think? And why do you think that? And where is your evidence? So I'm going to be questioning all of the witnesses. I'm going to be looking at all the evidence. I'm going to be evaluating it. And at the end, I'm going to weigh it all up and give my opinion based upon the evidence that has been explored. And that will be there. What can you conclude? So referring back to the title, considering the key points, what are my conclusions, please?
I'm a bit confused because in fact we have to do two different things. One is to give our point of view, and the other is to explain the theories that are in presence. So do we have to separate the two things, or we have to mix everything? Because it's a bit confusing.
You're really giving your point of view in the conclusion. Yeah. In the main body, you're looking at the various arguments. You're comparing and contrasting them. But you're not really giving your opinion at this stage. You're just setting out the evidence. You're showing it. You're showing the strengths and weaknesses in the competing positions. And at the end, like the judge, you're giving your verdict. You're saying, based upon this argument, based upon this evidence, it would appear reasonable to conclude that, what could you say? It is important to consider not only financial rewards, but other incentives for employees in order to make sure that they are all motivated and they are I can't even think now, that that the company maximises their efforts and their talents. So what you're doing is you're summing up like a judge does in a court case, considering the evidence, and then arriving at an overall conclusion. And what this argument shows is what? Or what this discussion suggests is that maybe there are other forms of motivational ways that you can get the best out of your staff other than financial rewards. It might be increasing their holidays. It might be giving them the chance to feed back and say how processes could be improved in the company. It might be given the opportunity to have professional development and training. Maybe being on the board, giving their view in company meetings. And then the staff feel as though they've got a say in the running of the company. So there are lots of different ways that staff can be motivated. So you need to give reasons to support your argument. And you're unlikely to agree or disagree 100%. There's always things in favour of one view and things against it, and then things in favour and against another particular view. In social sciences, you're not actually going to come up with a solution. You're going to come up with a viewpoint, a possible perspective. And you're trying to make it as persuasive as possible. And even though your lecturer might disagree with you, it doesn't matter. If you have written a good essay and supported it with evidence and arrived at a conclusion, even if they disagree with you, it doesn't matter. They can respect your argument. And it's important to have a balanced viewpoint. You're looking at both sides of the argument. And you need to think, why is my view persuasive? What are the implications, the consequences of my view? What does it mean? Suppose I am right, what would this mean? Have I got recommendations to make in terms of motivating staff, treating staff well, training them? Do I have recommendations? I'm not saying this is perfect. These are some ideas. It's up to you to arrive at your own. How do you want to argue your case? How do you want to structure your essay? Now here's one. Analyse the economic impacts due to demographic changes in the UK population. Now I haven't just made this one up. This is from one of the lecturers in the Department of Organisational Psychology, Patrick Tissington. And he wrote this essay question. So, what I'd like you to do, I'd like you to think, if you were going to answer that, first of all, I'd like you to think about how can you break that question up? What's the instruction word, and what's the topic, and what's the limiting words, the focus? And then, could you think about what would be the key points, like I created that spidergram? What would be the key points that I would want to write about if I was going to answer that question? Now you could do that on your own if you want, or you can do it with somebody sitting next to you. It's up to you. Leave it up to you, okay? We'll only spend 5 minutes doing this. And sometimes people say, well, that's not long enough, 5 minutes. And I say, well, actually, you might get that in your exam, and you are only going to have 5 minutes. So it might be realistic. But obviously, you haven't been studying this particular module, so I'll give you a little bit of leeway on it. Should we break down the question? Where's the instruction word? Yeah, analyse. So that is a real postgraduate term. It's not just describe or list. Analyse is you being critical about the key points and looking for the pros, cons, strengths, weaknesses. What's the topic? Yeah, the economic impacts. Yeah, so it's always debatable here. The economic impacts in the UK population, maybe. And the limiting terms are it's demographic changes. These are the things, we're not just looking at the whole of the UK population and the economy. We're looking at that, but we're looking at it in terms of, well, how is that changing in terms of demographic changes? Things are happening in terms of the population. Different constituents, different proportions of the population, and so on. There are changes. So how's that going to affect, how's that going to impact on the UK population economically? And what about how we would break down that question, that spidergram? How many people had to think about that, the different elements of the question, and considering the key points in relation to those elements? What is Analyse asking us to do? Has anyone ever had that in an essay question before? Analyse. Oh, I don't believe you. It's like?
Go beyond.
Yeah, it is yeah. It's more demanding, yeah. It's go beyond. Dig deeper. We need to know more. What are the competing positions? I'm getting good at this. Examine in very close detail. Identify important points and the chief features. Break the information into its constituent parts. That's why the mind map or the spidergram is quite good, because you're looking at the different elements. Examine the relationship between the parts. What's the connections? Where are things similar? Where are they different? The economic impacts. Now, this isn't me coming up with these ideas. This is Professor Tissington who's come up with these ideas. So, if you disagree, go and see him. I'm just giving you his ideas, okay. Now, he wrote the essay title and he came up with his brainstorm, this spidergram. So, economic impacts could be a shortage of workers in terms of the demographic changes. Because the population's getting older. Maybe the birth rate's gone down. So there's a shortage of workers. Maybe a loss in productivity. We know that in this country productivity is low. There could be lots of reasons for that, but it's not as good as it is in other countries. There's a loss in export contracts. So that's an economic impact. A loss in gross domestic product. So the amount of turnover in this country. So those are the economic impacts. That's what's happening. And it doesn't look too good. So what are the demographic changes? Anyone got any thoughts? What are the demographic changes?
Well, first of all, I probably look at how you define demographics to begin with. Because it's quite a broad definition, and there can be different interpretations of what a demographic is.
Okay. So that might be the case. Not always in every single essay, but it might be it's a particularly controversial term or it's got different interpretations. So if you start arguing from one perspective, one particular definition, without clearing that first and saying, well, actually, there are a number of definitions, but for the purposes of this essay, this is the most important definition or the most persuasive definition, and you give reasons for that. So you haven't just thought, oh, I like that one best. There are very good reasons why you've chosen this particular definition. Now, thanks for that. Now, I haven't got that here. So you're adding to the spidergram. Okay. So if we arrived at a working definition of demographic changes, what could they be, do you think? I mentioned a couple of them earlier, or certainly one of them.
Where is it? The number?
Yeah. Yeah, well, one could be, people, an older workforce. People are getting older. And maybe the birth rate. And what, sorry?
So the aging population.
Yeah. So some people are being asked to be firefighters when they're 70. The government's saying, no, you can't retire when you're 55. You have to work until you're 65 or 70. I don't want some 70-year-old trying to climb up a ladder trying to save my life. He should have retired by then. So maybe we're asking people to work longer and longer and longer.
But it could also be socioeconomic class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure that is. Yeah. So, yeah, we need to actually identify the segments of the demographic changes. Who are they, and why is it happening? So, aging population, migration, immigration, population trends. Maybe there's a lower birth rate. Maybe there's a higher birth rate. These are things we need to take into account. So we need to think about, well, what does this mean for employers? What do employers want? Well, they obviously want skilled workers. They want more university-educated workers. And they want flexible workers. They like the zero-hour contracts, don't they? Really, they like people on demand. That's what employers want. So what could employers do about this? They could try and make sure there are more women in the workforce. and older workers. In fact, I was reading the Guardian newspaper today, and the CBI, the Confederation of British Industry, were asking the government to improve maternity grants to help women to come back into the workforce. Because it costs a lot of money. Sometimes employers are asking women to leave the workforce, their company, when they become pregnant. It's not necessarily legal, but they do. Sometimes they have to pay them off. Then they have to get somebody else. They have to employ somebody else. They have to train them up. It costs a lot of money. It's disruptive. So employers are saying, actually, we want those women to stay in the workplace and come back after their maternity leave. Employers could look at greater in-house training. Instead of relying on the government to do the training, the companies themselves train the workforce, their own workforce. More flexible working arrangement to attract employees, particularly people with children, obviously. And these days, if you've got older employees, they may be looking after their parents as well. Greater use of incentives to attract and retain good workers. That's what employers are looking or can look at. And maybe better salaries. And the government could do something. I think it's talking about that now. Greater focus on immigration selection. Maybe hand-picking skilled workers. I suppose it's been doing that anyway, hasn't it? It's been looking at doctors and nurses and maybe trying to educate more people to degree level, or educating people in subject areas that are needed. So that's what Pat Tissington came up with. And obviously, he's got an advantage over you because he has written the question. That's always helpful, isn't it, if you write the question yourself. But also, he's done a lot of the research. He knows the subject area. But if he wanted a really in-depth answer, he'd be asking people to consider these. Now, I'm not saying that you would have considered all of these particular points of view. But there's certainly key ones you need to think about: the economic impacts. What are the demographic changes? And who does that hit? Who does that affect? It's going to affect the employers, it's going to affect the employees, and the government. The government's going to be involved. The government needs to take action. So what needs to happen next, in other words? So it's making sure that we cover all the elements of that question. We don't leave anything out. And so in his introduction, he said, tell the reader where you're planning to go with the essay in order to answer the question. And they call that road mapping, or signposting. Got it wrong. Signposting. Signposting to the reader. This essay is a journey. And this is the journey you're going to make if you read the essay. And these are the roads you're going to be going down. This is how you're going to get there. These are the directions. You explain the core aspects of your essay and why these aspects have been chosen. So you identify the key points. Why are these key points? Why have you decided to address these? Why is this important? And you give the background information. So the context. Now, since that was written, we've had this referendum. So that's obviously going to come into it, isn't it? What are the issues in terms of the economy, employment, companies? What are the key issues in relation to that particular question? And he even breaks it down into sentences. He says the first few sentences give background information. So what's the context? Why is this question being asked now? What is the current economic climate? What are these demographic changes? The next few sentences. Oh, it's the ageing problem he's talking about. Oh, right, okay. There aren't enough young people coming into the workforce. And so companies are hanging on to the older workers. The next few sentences mention the impacts of the ageing problem and its impact on the job market and the importance of discussing this specific topic. Why is this important, in other words? He's mentioned it, but why is it important? And the final few sentences refer to which parts of the demographics and the economy you'll focus on. So which are the most important aspects? Because you can't write about everything. Maybe you've got 1,500 words, 2,000 words, 2,500. You probably need a book to write this. You can't write a book. So you can't cover everything in depth. Now, when you do that, you can refer to all of the issues, but you can say, for the purposes of this essay, we will concentrate on A, B, and C. We're aware of D, E, and F as well, are issues, but these are of secondary importance. So we're showing to the reader, yeah, we recognise those, we're aware of those, but we're going to concentrate on the most important ones. The main body. Well, quite a lot of points there. He's talking about the demographic changes, so he's going to mention that first. Oh, the ageing population, and there are fewer skilled workers. Migration and immigration are factors. What's the available workforce at the moment, and what's it likely to be in 10 years' time, or 20 years' time? What do organisations need? They want skilled and flexible workers. And they want more and more university educated staff. What's the economic impact? Well, the shortage of workers, loss in productivity and export contracts, loss in gross domestic product. Okay. There's a lot here, so we can't go into depth in every single point. What could be the political response? Greater focus on immigration selection. Greater focus on ensuring more people are university educated. And then the organisational response. The companies, the organisations, what can they do? They could employ more women workers, older workers. Make sure they train their staff themselves. More flexible work arrangements to attract good staff. So it might be people, women particularly, returning after having children, and many of them don't want to work full time. But the company will say, oh no, you've got to work full time, so you've lost that skilled worker. But if you could say, well, you could do a job share, well, maybe you're not going to lose that person. Or maybe you could do 2 or 3 days a week. Or maybe you could come in at 10 o'clock and leave at 3. And greater use of incentives, better starting salaries to attract and retain good staff. So this is from Patrick. This is the lecturer in organisational psychology. This is what he would like. Now he's talking about a very, 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 very good essay. And then the conclusion. So nothing new in the conclusion. No new theories, no new concepts, no new findings. You've already done all the discussions. You've looked at all the evidence. Now it's your chance to arrive at your verdict. You could refer to the demographic changes, looking at an ageing population in the UK, importance of highly skilled workers for UK businesses. And this is a threat to the economy. We're not producing enough younger workers who are skilled coming into the workforce. He's suggesting, looking at the strategies developed and implemented, the impact could be minimised. So that's the government doing something about it, but also businesses. And that's what the Guardian article was about today, really, in a way. It's telling the government, the CBI are telling the government, look, this is what we need if we're to be successful. And this is where you give your own opinion. But in the third person, not the I word. It's the third person. It would appear reasonable to conclude, based upon the evidence that has been considered. You could highlight a strategy you consider to be the most effective. But make sure you've got the evidence to back up your view. If you just come up with a pet theory, but don't support it with evidence, then that's a big weakness. Do you think governmental policies are more important than business strategies? Are they both equally important? What's your view? He's suggesting here only a combination of the two is likely to lead to optimal success. So although he's highlighted lots of different points there, he's really saying, you know, you need to concentrate on the few key ones that you've identified. You can't look at everything in depth. How does that seem in terms of essay planning? Is that what you normally do? Or not? Well, to be honest, you don't normally have Professor Tissington sitting next to you to help you to, you know, plan your essay, do you? So we've got an advantage there. He's written a book, actually. He gave me the book that this is from, so it's quite handy. But you can see there are very clear stages that we're going through. Identifying the question, analysing it, identifying the key points, brainstorming, mind mapping, converting that mind map into a structure. And you'll always have at least those three parts: the introduction, the body, the conclusion. There might be more parts to it, but it will certainly have those three parts. So I'm just going to talk about some resources that might be useful to help you. Everyone's always asking me about referencing, and I don't always know the answers. So I think, oh my God, how am I going to reply to this question? I'm not quite sure. I haven't got the answer. I know what I'll do. I'll look at that. Now that's not the second to last edition. I've got the new edition, which is bigger, out this year. Now I'm not trying to sell it to you. It's in the library, but that's quite useful. But anyway, if you can't get there, you can have a look at these links. Referencing a book, referencing a journal, referencing the web. Now I get asked things like Twitter and all this sort of stuff, and I think, oh my goodness, I don't know. I'm going to look up there. I'm going to find out. So you don't have to walk around with all that information in your head. There are places to find out when you need them. That information. How do you reference?
What about the tool, on the orientation day, was like something that they talk about Zotero or something?
Well, there's Zotero, there's RefMe, yeah. Yeah? Yeah, they work, yeah. I think Aidan particularly likes Mendeley, I think he said. Mendeley's one. But I know the library also do tutorials. They have sessions on using Zotero. And Aidan liked RefMe as well. RefMe? Yeah, RefMe, which is a simpler one. But you can get an app for your phone, and apparently you can swipe your phone across the book, or scan it, sorry, against the bookmark or something like that, and it puts all the information on your phone. I haven't used it, so I can't tell you. Please make sure you proofread your work before you hand it in, because sometimes people finish their essay at 11 o'clock on Friday night and they have to hand in their essay at 11:15 on Friday night. And so they think, oh no, I haven't got enough time to proofread it, I'll just submit it anyway. So it's important to use that essay planner to make sure that you finish it in enough time to give you time to proofread it, to check it. Because you need to check it for spelling, grammar, referencing, citations, structure, a lot of things to check for. And you don't want any glaring errors in there that you could have avoided if you'd have had time to check it. Clara Reid. This is a good way of checking your work. If you go into the library or the IT workrooms, you upload your writing onto the computer and you open this software, which is on all of the computers. It will read aloud your essay back to you. So it's a good way of checking your work. listening to your writing. Because we spend so much time reading and writing, researching our topic, it's no longer objective. We've got mixed up with it. We're part of it. We can't stand back and read what we've written. So this allows you to listen to your writing, which helps to bring back that sense of objectivity. And so you might hear things and you think, oh no, that doesn't sound right. I would never write that. And then you check and you think, oh no, I have. Oh, that's not very good, is it? So it helps you to check. And I know that there's actually a mind mapping facility on this as well, which you might find useful. Now you can get your own copy, because somebody said to me or asked me, can I download this? And I said, no, you can't. We haven't got that facility. But you can buy your own copy at an 80% discount for Birkbeck students. So the information is there if you want to get your own copy. But obviously it's going to be a reduced copy, a reduced version. Not the whole thing, but the main thing, listening to your writing. But you could explore that. These slides are all on the management postgraduate area of Moodle, so you can have a look. I'll probably mention the Academic Phrase Bank. This could be very useful for your writing. The University of Manchester have collected thousands of academic phrases from academic books, academic journals, academic websites. And then, if that wasn't enough, they put them into categories like introduction, conclusions, referring to the literature. And in fact, when you read that list, introducing your work, referring to the literature, being critical, that reads very much like the structure of an academic journal. And that could be the structure of your dissertation, maybe. So it's going to be very useful. Just be aware that it's not all business and social science. Some of these phrases could be engineering, history. So if you like some of the phrases you want to use them, you might need to tinker with them, adapt them to suit your discipline. Aha. The importance of paragraphing. Just like to have a look at this, please. I hope it works.
Importance of paragraphs. If information is organised and your main points are clear, you'll get better marks. Making your ideas and arguments stand out is mostly done through having clear and well-structured paragraphs. A really good way to write paragraphs is to use the Teal structure. This is an example. See how the topic sentence tells you the main idea of the paragraph? The rest just supports the main idea. If it doesn't relate to the main idea, it doesn't belong in the paragraph. It is sort of like a formula for writing. Linking your ideas helps the paragraph flow, and it shows how your analysis has developed. Have a look at the examples. The paragraph with linking words flows and it is easy to read. Without linking words, it is disjointed and more difficult to follow. Here are a few more. By using linking words, it looks like you have thought more deeply about your research. For more information about paragraphs, try the tutorial. Thanks for watching.
I will mention those linking words in a minute. But I wanted to talk about paragraphs. I've heard paragraphs described as the building blocks of your writing. They're very important. But unfortunately, not everybody writes in paragraphs or effective paragraphs. So I thought it would be useful to have a look at that, that little video. They talked about the Teal system. So the T is the topic sentence. The topic sentence tells the reader what the paragraph's about. And normally, the topic sentence is the first sentence in the paragraph. Not always, but most of the time. And then following that, there's an explanation. Well, why are you telling me about this? Why is this important? So it's explaining why this topic is being discussed in the first place. And then it's producing some evidence and maybe an example, a reference. This is why it's important. And here's an example, because this expert from my reading is explaining why this is important. And here's an example in the real world. And at the end, linking it back to the topic, drawing together those particular points to close that particular topic. And they gave you an example. So the topic there is team cohesiveness. And the explanation, team cohesiveness helps different people to work towards common goals. So that's important, certainly in the workplace. Well, is there any evidence? Oh yeah, here's Addison, 1996. He explains highly cohesive teams are more effective. Okay, yeah, that's good evidence. Oh, and there's an example as well. For example. So we're making a very strong point there. We're referencing it. We're explaining it. And then at the end, in the final sentence, we're bringing it all together. Therefore, team cohesiveness enhances team effectiveness. Now, I'm not saying every single paragraph is going to be like that, but when you're certainly making a point, you're trying to argue something, this is a good method to work to. It's a good way of thinking about structuring your writing. Here's another one I found. Irrigation schemes, a vital source of food production. Okay, oh, that's interesting. That sounds about right. Yeah, we need irrigation in order to produce food. And here's some evidence. Estimated that between 35% of world food is produced by irrigation, as a reference. That's some evidence there. And obviously that is important. And it goes on to give more details and examples, and it references those. And then at the end of the paragraph, I never did find out who FAO are, I don't know, have estimated that the annual global growth rate for gross agricultural production continue on irrigation. So it's back to irrigation schemes there. There's the link. So there's a logical way of writing. It makes sense. It's endorsed, it's supported by evidence. You're showing what this paragraph's about, why it's important, and you're bringing forward evidence to support what you're trying to argue. What do you think of that? Long? Too long? Headache? Eyesight problems? It's too heavy, yeah. We need a break when we're reading, don't we? When I get a book, I'm just reading.
You might be bored with it. You might have a very good point, but because of illogical presentation of the paragraph, the person might not get just what's this.
You're a hard judge, you are. Yeah, you're right. I think, oh no, I can't read that. That person hasn't really structured their thinking. They just put everything in there. It's like packing their case, going on holiday, just throwing everything in, then zipping it up. Oh no, I can't read that. But I could read this, because when I get to the first paragraph, will probably be the case, I can have a little rest. And then I can read the second paragraph, and then I get to here, and then I can have a little rest again. So yeah, I feel better. And I like this space in between. It just makes me feel better. I feel more comfortable. But in fact, it's the same text, exactly the same. It's just it's been divided up. And in fact, what this text is all about, it's not actually an academic text as such. So it's not following the Teal system, because, I mean, the only thing is, it is following the Teal system in the sense that the first sentence tells you what it's about. It's the topic. Examination stress is most effectively managed through good preparation. So the rest of the paragraphs follow that subject. Now the first paragraph is about people being stressed in their exams before the exams, thinking about them, preparing for them. They feel a little bit anxious. The second paragraph is about people feeling anxious during their exam, wondering if they're writing the right questions. Do they understand the question? Are they running out of time? And this one is about after the exam. They're thinking, did I answer the right questions? How did I do? So you might say, well, you're telling me two different things. You're telling me that it should all be about the same topic, the paragraph. Well, that previous big paragraph was all about the one topic. But what we can do is we can subdivide it. So it's all about the one topic, but we can subdivide it into before, during, after. Because that's being kind to our reader, and it's making us show that we are structured in our thinking and our writing, the way we're delivering our message. So we need to be thinking about our reader when we are writing, because then that gives us confidence in the way we're structuring our thoughts. If we're just throwing everything into one giant paragraph, that suggests we're not. The other extreme, of course, is you can have a sentence there, and then another sentence, and then another sentence, and they're not joined together at all. So it's probably, if there are like 3 or 4 sentences, maybe thinking about, well, what are those sentences about? Should they all be in the same paragraph? Are they all about the same topic? So it's planning. What you could be thinking about is if you wrote a word or a phrase beside each paragraph to identify the subject. What is it about? And that will offer you a series of thumbnails, this mega structure of your writing. And then you could look and think, well, does it all make sense? Is it all in the right order? Are there certain paragraphs that should be together? Or is this paragraph about 2 different topics? Maybe I need to split it up. It's worth some thought as you're planning your writing. So academic style, that's important. Academic English is objective and impersonal. So I mentioned before really about I. We don't really want the I word, normally anyway. I think, consider, no. Better would be, it could be argued, claimed that. It's that third person way of explaining. Academic English is concise. It uses as few words as possible. Now I'm not saying all academic writers do that. They should do. But due to the fact that, well, just write because. It's quicker. Academic English is cautious. Water shortages trigger conflict between nations. Now that's a very bold statement. Is there the evidence to support that statement? Maybe there isn't. Maybe it's more likely that water shortages may trigger conflict. So in other words, we've got to match the strength of our statement with the strength of our evidence. Do the two match up? Because we're making a very bold, definitive judgment here. Maybe we haven't got the evidence to support it. And the person reading it is going to say, well, I don't agree with that. Where's the evidence for this? But they might well be able to agree with that. Informal language. The community managed to scratch a living from the poor soil. The community managed to survive. That's better. Scratch a living, that's 3 words. Survive is 1 word. People are always saying, I can't fit in my argument to 2,000 words. Okay, well I've cut 2 of them for you. Scratch a living is more sort of street language, colloquial. The word to get is not good, even though I use it in my emails sometimes because I'm lazy. But not in academic writing. We shouldn't have get. The settlers got ill. The settlers became ill. So get, maybe we talk about that when we're in the coffee bar or the pub having a chat with somebody. But we don't really want to use it in academic language. And avoid these 2-word or phrasal verbs. The proposal for representation was turned down. That's 2 words. What we could say was rejected. That's 1 word. It sounds better. So, I'm getting tired of my voice. I bet you are as well. So I think it's time for you to do something. So it says, rewrite the sentence is below in a more cautious, concise or formal style. Shall we look at number 1? What's the problem with number 1? Fizzy's okay.
It's a very strong statement.
It's probably not, yeah. I mean, it's a word you can use. I mean,
You can use solutions.
sorry, strong statement you said, yeah.
So I put like the word proves and the word drinks containing sugar leads to, may lead to.
Yeah.
Maybe use a slightly less strong word.
Yeah. So that's very definitive. Research proves that drinking large volumes of fizzy drinks containing sugar leads to the development of type 2 diabetes. Now, logic would suggest that that could well be the case. But have we got the evidence to support that? So the probability is, or research suggests, or may suggest. So we're just being a bit more careful. Fizzy drinks containing sugar may lead. May lead. We're softening it. We're not changing our direction of travel, but we're just being a bit more careful. Now this one, I didn't really cover this in the other 2 slides, so this is one I've thrown in at you here. So, what would you say? So this is different from all the other ones we've looked at. Is there anything there you think, well, actually that doesn't look quite right? There's something wrong there. In the second one.
You're repeating the
Repetition of that.
Well, yeah, what it is when we write here, the Engineering and Physical Science Research Council, we don't want to keep writing that, because we might have to write it 20 times. And think how many words that's going to take up in our writing. That's going to be painful. And it's painful for the reader as well. They don't want to keep reading that. So what we do is we shorten it. But we've got to shorten it immediately we use the whole term. So Engineering and Physical Science Research Council, then in brackets, EPSRC. So we've told the reader what EPSRC is. So the next time, which is in the next paragraph, we can use EPSRC. But in this example, we didn't immediately show that abbreviation. So we need to show the abbreviation immediately after the full term, in brackets. And then after that, we can use the abbreviated version throughout, saving all those words and not boring our readers to death using these big, long titles.
So it will be, the project was partially funded by Engineering and Physical Science first.
Research Council, yeah, and then in brackets, EPSRC. And so then we can use EPSRC every time we want. And people will see that, and it's a shortcut. And that's okay. But we need to establish what EPSRC is immediately we use it. Number 3's got a couple of issues, at least 2 issues. Even though it's a very short sentence, there are 2 things that aren't very good about it. Did you? Sorry, what do you?
You can't use can't, in fact, you have to say candidate.
Yeah. Abbreviations, can't. So we don't want to use can't, don't, won't, shan't. We must use the whole word, or the whole words. Also, do you remember I said about using I? Well, we can't use you either. So how can we turn that round, that sentence?
People.
You could say people.
Okay. Say all the numbers in that report are reliable or not?
Unreliable, yeah. All right, here's another challenge then. How can you shorten all the numbers?
Yeah.
The term all the numbers, how can you shorten that? The results, yeah, that could be a good one. What do you produce when you're doing research? You produce and something that you can use and then compare. What are you looking for? Evidence. The word I was thinking was data. So that means data, that means evidence, that means numbers. So you could write something like the data in the report is not reliable or is unreliable. The data in the report is unreliable. So we've got rid of you and we've got rid of can't. And number 4, researchers have been looking into the problem for 15 years.
You can change looking into because it's too long. While studying or investigating.
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, so looking into is that phrasal verb. It's a 2-word phrase for a verb, which we don't really need. Investigating sharper. It's 1 word.
And the number 15.
You don't like 15, do you?
No,
You-
I mean.
You'd rather have what?
Yeah.
What would you do? Write it, F-I.
Yeah.
You could do. It's up to you. You're okay with that? But if you don't like that,
Numbers are okay.
numbers should be okay.
Okay.
What you can do is when you are reading your research articles and essential reading, see what they do in those. What do the academics, how do they write it in their research? Now this one's really horrible. The samples had inadequate strength properties, whatever that means. I'm not sure what that means myself. It doesn't really make a huge amount of sense, but we could make it at least sound better. So the samples is all right. So really what it's saying is they weren't very strong. The samples weren't strong. So you could write the samples were not strong enough. It's a sort of rubbish sentence anyway. So number 6, consumer interest in electronic billing and payment is getting bigger and bigger.
We know that to use better, and maybe you can say it's increasing.
Yes, lovely, fine. Increasing, 1 word, better. Thank you. Number 7. Health education has a positive impact on a patient's quality of life.
You can say health education has a positive life quality impact on the patient.
You could say that. You're producing more words now.
No, I'm changing like the order of the sentence.
Okay. Why don't you like the original one then? What don't you like about that part? Why don't you like it? You just don't like the sound of it, the look of it.
I don't know. Quality of life.
Life quality is short. Life quality is short.
Well, it wasn't really that part of the sentence that was the problem. Yes, so it's that caution. So health education has a positive impact on a patient's quality of life. Now, we might think that sounds right, and it might be probable, highly likely, but we don't know. So we could write it as, it is likely that health education You could write health education may have a positive impact. So it's being more cautious. Number 8, the economy is affected by things that happen outside the country.
Again,
You can use overseas courses and overseas.
Overseas, yeah, that could be. Overseas, yeah, external factors, that's nice. So you've got most of the way there, we just want overseas something. It could be overseas factors. External factors. Sounds better, doesn't it? This is like, oh, you know, things that happen outside this country, or whatever they are.
Things is not good.
Now, things isn't good. It's a bit vague, isn't it? Number 9. This is owing to the fact that the other physical forces, such as, oh dear, that's going on a bit there. What's wrong with that one? Yeah, owing to the fact. There's too many words. We don't need that. Somebody said it. This is because. Yeah, it's quicker. Owing to the fact. Sometimes people can write a bit pompously. They try and sound clever. So they put more words in it. I have divided my report into 5 sections. Yeah, I's not good. And my's not good. So that third person idea, the report has been divided into 5 sections. Or the report is in 5 sections. And then the last one, teleworking leads to isolation. It's that idea of caution again. We need to be cautious. I mean, we might well think that teleworking could lead to isolation. It is possible that teleworking may lead to isolation. It's possible. It makes sense. Now, thank you for that. I do have a couple of slides here about signposting. I mentioned signposting. So the introduction, the essay is divided into 5 main parts, 2 main parts. Part 1 will discuss this, part 2 will discuss that. This essay will argue this. So this is the idea of signposting to your reader what's going to follow in the introduction, and also signposting when you're making a change, or you're introducing an idea, or you're arriving at a conclusion, or you're summing up a paragraph. You're signposting to the reader, well, this is happening now. To sum up, in contrast to the evidence, okay, so we've looked at the evidence, and now we're going to look at something else. We're going to look at a contrasting position, linking or developing a new idea. So we're telling the reader where we're going and what we're doing at any given time. So it's easy to follow. We're being thoughtful to our reader. And we can do that with those linking words, and that was in that little video, the linking words. So if we're adding something, or sequencing it, or comparing, or emphasizing, these are words that we can use and we will see on a regular basis in academic writing. Now, I did have some more slides, but I'm not going to show you those, but they are on Moodle, because I did want to show you very quickly. I managed to get an example of an essay, but I only got it this morning, so I haven't had a chance to think about it too much. And this essay got a mark of 73. So I'm going to put this up on Moodle. I just thought I'd have a quick look at it. And here was the title: The Different Roles of Weak and Strong Ties in the Innovative Process. And I looked at it and I thought, actually, that doesn't have an instruction. That doesn't sound like a question. So sometimes you have to actually turn it into a question. So I thought, well, actually, I could say compare and contrast the different roles of weak and strong ties in the innovation process. I've had to turn it into a question myself. So sometimes it's a statement, and you think, yeah, so what? What do you want me to do with that? Okay, I've got to turn it into a question. So that was one way I thought of turning it into a question. And so this is on the subject of innovation systems, networks and social capital, which is a module. And it's about the roles of weak and strong ties in the innovation process. So it's about social capital is the module title. So straight away, it's talking about a concept. Social capital is a concept which has been proven difficult to measure. And straight away, they give you a definition, what we were talking about earlier on. It's difficult to fathom. What does it mean? Well, here's an example. Here's a definition. It's referring to strengths, strong and weak ties. That was in the question. Okay, so we're showing to the reader, yeah, we're addressing the question. The aim of this essay is to look more closely at these ties. So it's telling the reader, this is what I'm trying to do. This is what this essay is all about. And it's addressing what was asked in the question. It's referring to strong ties, why they're important. And then it mentions weak ties. It's comparing and contrasting them there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on Moodle for you so you can have a look at it. I'll do that this afternoon. Okay? So that got a grade of 73. So can't be too bad. So I'm going to finish there because I've overrun a little bit. But you can see the other slides. They're about giving quotations and paraphrasing your work. And you'll be able to find the slides and you'll also be able to find this essay. So thanks very much for coming. And look forward to seeing you again. Okay? Bye-bye.